Hey guys, this is Corey and Christine, and welcome and thanks for tuning in to Beyond Freelance. Today we're going to have a quick chat about processes and procedures. It's been one of the most popular questions that we found. So yeah, before we get started, I just wanted to sort of point out, I think this conversation is probably going to sort of touch on that stuff, but there's a real difference between what a process is and a procedure, and it's like documenting the difference. And if we have I already said to Christine before we started this, but a good example of a process is, if we all know how to make a sandwich, and we might choose to make our own sandwich, but once you're Subway and you're a business and you start to record that, you would have a standard operating procedure. You can call it what you want, but it's where it starts to become documented, and you start to record that so you can kind of reuse that and start putting that into your business as an actual tool. So that was my sort of initial thoughts on, I guess, the difference between roughly having a process and a documented process. So yeah, I'll sort of throw something over to you, Christine, and let's have a quick chat about like what processes you have and what sort of stuff you've set up, and that difference between like a loose process and a sort of documented one.
Well, I think that for me that, I've always sort of winged it as a designer until probably 7 years ago, because there's always sort of the lone wolf and it didn't really matter. It was in my head, and that was always enough.
Yep.
And then as projects got more complex and I was raising my prices and people were paying more, I think that my clients started getting lost. They didn't understand what was coming next. And
Yep.
even though I had that process in my head, I began to see the need for helping them understand what was coming next. Because the whole trust me, I've got your back was is only good to a certain point,
Yes.
After a certain dollar amount, it's kind of like, okay, well, I need to know what's coming next. And so that's when I started recognizing that I needed to, write stuff down, and also realizing that, even though there was, if you formulate an email to somebody, if you get that formulated just right, and then you save it, the next time you go to formulate it,
Yep.
even though it maybe only saves you 15 minutes, it's saving you 15 minutes times however many times you have to do that. And that's when I started really recognizing that I needed to be writing stuff down, creating a documented process for my
Yeah, totally. You said it can only save you 15 minutes. I think the other thing that's really big with that is it's not just 15 minutes. Sometimes it's that mental energy of
yes.
sort of rerunning through it. So it's not just the time that you're spending.
Yes. How am I
going to
keep that? How am I going to keep that client from freaking out?
Yeah. And if you do it once and you get it right and you get a good response, yes. You're like, this is the one, or you spend extra time. Like if you're just pumping that stuff out and you're doing it on the fly, you're going to spend less time. But if you're like, okay, let's perfect this and spend half an hour and do it properly and sort of, read through it and make sure it's crafted, and then save it. And then, I can reuse this as a response in these situations. But something that you sort of talked about, I think you touched on, sort of implied there, was that end-to-end stuff. Like you're sort of saying, there's probably processes that are in specific areas, but it sounded like what you started to document or realize early was that end-to-end process, so that the client or the prospect knows where they're at in that process, like from the start of the project to the finish.
Yeah. And then, that it becomes something that you can create, you can talk about in layman's terms in a proposal or on a call, like this is my typical project process looks like.
Yep.
And so that they know, and then I just repeat that. And so then, that this gets into sales, but that just makes the sale a little bit easier too, when they can kind of put themselves into the process and understand it and see the end, even though they may not be able to visualize the end, they can see getting to the end with me.
Yes.
I think I primarily do web design and development. So, my process kind of was broken out into, or it became broken out into like onboarding, research, design, development, launch.
Yep.
And then I kind of refined inside each of those.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's exactly what I was that's exactly it. Like initially it's working out what that broad process is. And so
right.
you can sort of, and like you said, sales. And I think once you go through that, if you're sort of in that pre-sales call and you're talking through your process, and this is something that you need to understand, people come to people like us because of an end result. And if we can explain that there's a process, it looks really safe and secure. Like, if we do these things, we will get that result for you. And that's why I am able to consistently produce this stuff, because I go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, end.
Yes, it's like, it's completely subjective what we're going to come up with. And you know, there's different variables or beginning variables for every single client, but I know my process will get me to the end. I'm 100% confident that it will get me to the end. And so then I can, you know, no matter because of the way I research or whatever, I know that I'm always going to have a positive result on the end. And so that creates confidence, you know, at the beginning.
Yep. And then also you sort of talked about breaking down, you know, once you've got those things, that sort of digging deeper into each sort of stage. And I think probably the benefit for that is it helps people know where they are at that stage and what's normal, and it gives them some sort of reassurance around different things. So one of the questions that, the way that this question was framed is like, what are the most effective processes that we've set up? So obviously there's that broad end to end, and I think that's your key. Like, you've got to get that first and know, it doesn't matter. We can all have a very similar process, or you can have a different process. Yeah.
It's kind of personalized. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And I actually think some of the things where you can break them down so they are personal in that sales call, if you can say something and it's not the normal thing that everyone says, and you're like, this is really important to me, that means that if they see value in that process, and anyone who doesn't have that part of their process, they will question that. So I'm going to talk about me, for example. The way that I work is that it's really important for me to create the brief, to create that actual project scope. This is my process, but I say to people, and I explain that for me, this is about information exchange. I know about my services. I don't know about your marketing, your business. If I make you go fill out a form, or you provide me with the brief, and I'm not bagging those things, this is just my process. Mm-hmm. If you do that, then we're making a presumption that I understand you. If you tell me and I document this and I give it back to you, then you can just sit there with a cup of coffee and review my ability to hear what you're saying. And so we get on the same page very quickly. Now, when I say that as a part of my process, people go, oh, anyone that doesn't do that, I've got to question that. So you know, I think that's an important part. Not every customer's going to go, oh, they might go, that sounds like extra work, or I don't want to, you know, I don't want to pay someone to do that stuff. And so that helps me align with clients. So I think that's an important one. So what's a process for you that's been really valuable and really successful? Or maybe you've got a contradicting one. You might say, well, I make people go to fill out stuff and it's streamlined this, or.
I think it depends on the client, because I think some, you know, if you're in a niche and you understand, like, you know, service-based women entrepreneurs, I tended to work with them, and I kind of knew what they needed. I just needed to understand what they were selling. And a lot of them were creative already. And so some clients I would actually collaborate with on the creative side of it. And they really liked that about me. But like the projects I'm working on now, it's like, I don't collaborate on the creative side. I have to, you know, that's all me. And it's up to me to understand what's going on so that I can then create what's needed in order to, you know, make the marketing effective or whatever. And so I think it for me, it's a little bit different when I was working in that niche, that was a selling point to be able to collaborate on the creative side together. But as far as that doesn't really answer your process question. But I had a process in place for helping them understand what I needed from them in order to create a collaborative brand. So step by step.
And I think, you know, you've sort of already touched on this, that it's really important that those processes are individualized, and it's going to come down to, you said, the type of customer, but there's also the type of service. So for example, if you're doing web services, a simple process might be to have like a pre-launch or post-launch website checklist. So you know that's a standard thing you know how to do. That's a personal process, but that will save you time, or so it might be the sort of thing that you give to a staff member, and they just follow the process, and you know that here you go. When we launch a site, go do that.
The launching is the first thing I delegated.
yeah, that's right. And that's the thing. If you can sort of document that process, It really, really allows someone else to sort of take over that, and you know that it's going to be done the same way that you want to be. You would do it if you were doing it yourself.
I think probably my most effective or biggest time saver has been honing the conversations inside each step, so that I have to go and probably kind of tweak them all a little bit depending on the client. But I'm even finding that the ones that work for the creative women entrepreneurs are working for this industrial stuff that I'm working on, because I found that clients tend to, I try to keep clients from like preempting or jumping ahead. And so it was a matter of like honing those conversations so that they understood exactly what they were supposed to focus on, exactly what they were supposed to do in this one moment, this step, without jumping ahead, or, because when they start jumping ahead, then they start micromanaging and stuff gets off track. And it's like it's sort of like, I have a vision for this whole thing. Each step is outlined. Here's what we're going to focus on in this one particular step. And so getting those conversations honed. So, cause it was like you'd go through the process and then you'd like zip somebody off a note, or you'd send something too soon cause you were excited. And then it like created this firestorm of like drama or whatever. And it's like, okay, oops, don't do that next time. Like honing those conversations so that people did exactly what I wanted them to at exactly when I wanted them to. Yeah. And I think that's probably one of my biggest time savers right now, just being able to draw on those conversations at every step, every task. Yep.
And that comes, that's something that's going to come from experience, but once you sort of define those sort of stages and those process steps that you have, you can start to hear those repeat in conversations or in emails, and it allows you to start to document that stuff. I think that's, and I think the key benefit that I'm getting from that too is that it gives you the ability to sort of to be really professional and say to people like, hang on a tick, you know how we get end result by doing this? Like, you're jumping to the 2 steps ahead. We will get to that. It's okay. We will get to that. We're not at design yet. Let's not talk about that. Or we're not at development. Let's not talk about functionality yet. We're not there. Whatever it is, however your process is broken down, it just means that you can sort of control the conversation, and they get that trust from you that no, we will do those things.
And I think that, one of the things that I have taught a lot in the past is like the difference between a worker bee and a strategic partner. And so somebody who has their processes established comes kind of into that relationship as a strategic partner, whether you're co-collaborating on design or you're being the strategic partner in that you're understanding the way you do it, understanding what, having them feed you the information and you giving it back to them in a way that you interpret it and the way that you see it's going to work for their business. Having that mindset of a strategic partner kind of allows you to keep clients from spinning out of control or going off track. And, and you can feel the shift when you become a worker bee in the relationship. It's like, what happened here? All of a sudden I'm, they're either micromanaging you or dictating you or whatever. And so having that stuff documented so that you can follow it, for me, has helped me maintain that like strategic partner status.
Yeah. And,
which
you said you can,
the projects, from going out of
control,
the extra vision cycles, all the stuff that takes us out of scope.
Yeah. And I think you said you can feel it when you go into that worker bee mode. What's really important is when, maybe you're in that freelancer sort of situation, you can really feel when it goes the other way, when you start to becoming that sort of strategic, like a partnership, and you're at like you're in with the business rather than being told what to do. You can feel when that first starts to happen and how powerful that is. So I think that's really, really important to point out. That's the flip side of that's the positive side of it. Yeah.
I think my processes were born out of too many worker bee situations, where you're like, that somebody, I've had clients, who, got micromanaging because it's like something was misunderstood because the process wasn't in place. And then you're like, Thanksgiving week is ruined or whatever, it's like those big mistakes that I made were all because of a misunderstanding, because of a lack of process or procedure. That's
huge. Yep. I think before we finish this off, I think one of the key things, it's not in this question here, but I think one of the key things that would come up that people will want to know about is like, what tools? Like, so maybe you've got these loose ideas in your head. What's the steps? What are the tools? Do you have any tips on getting started with that? If I want to start documenting, what should I do? How do I start?
There was this tool that I used, and it was a process tool. It was an app. It was years ago. I can't remember what it was, but I really honestly, Google Docs would work, like to outline something in Google Docs. It was something it was really a basic tool. I remember before there was a lot of these project management tools, I used that really simple tool. I would equate it really literally to like a Google Doc, where I started documenting everything. And I'm in the middle of a project right now where we have to create a new process. And I find that if you try to jump into a new tool with a new process, you're going to fumble. It's almost better to take it to something that you're really, really familiar with and just outline it and test it. And then you can take it to whatever tool. I've switched back and forth between different project management tools. And I think that we were talking about this before. I think it's really a personal choice. There are people who love Notion. I can't figure it out. I can't make it work. I'm on the receiving end of it and I don't love it. There are people who make it work for everything they're doing. For me, Asana has been a really great tool, especially the board view, because I can create visual sections. You have onboarding, like I just have my big sections of my process, and then I have the tasks dropping down. They're very visual. You can see the wireframes in there. You can see all the pieces in there. So that one works for me. But again, I think it's really, what kind of clients are you working with? How intuitive are they? I'm working with corporate people right now, so Asana is great. I think it's a personal choice, but I think you have to hone that process and then test it in the tool rather than trying to do both at the same time. Yeah,
I would, if I was going to say something, it would be exactly that. I totally agree. I actually did a workshop, and it was on. They were talking about processes in this workshop. It was a live thing. I went to the course, and I was sitting there, and they were going over a process, and they basically said that. You know what I did? I pulled out my phone while it was there, and I just started documenting it in the notes thing. I just dot pointed. I went did a heading for the things that I do, and then started to dot point them. And it really is that simple. It's like you can just start really broad, and then if you break down these sections, then inside that you just start dot pointing them, and then you can find the tools where they work. So a really good example. Again, I'll go back to a post-launch, pre-launch and post-launch or checklist for websites. I just documented those in Google, and it was literally creating the heading and bullet point. And then I use Asana as well. I've moved to ClickUp because it has some more flexibility, but it's very similar. But the idea was that with those, I created those as templates. And they've got a checklist next to them, and someone can tick them off, and it gets handed over. And when something's being launched, it's someone else can tick those things off. But they started off as a text document, like in Google Docs, just actually documenting it. And if you start with the broad thing, you can actually work out the things that are going to start with the things that you can implement and that are going to be easy, or the things that will save you time, and they are going to be individual. But yeah, I mean, I think we've chucked out a couple of examples, but I agree that it doesn't matter about the tool so much. And I think that's a great point, that if you try and learn a new tool and try to document processes at the same time, you're asking for double the amount of work.
I think too, one other thing that because right now I'm working in, we've talked about this. I'm in a corporate setting now.
Yeah.
And we're working on creating video in a kind of complex technical environment.
Yep.
And the first video, the process was really broken. And so we made all our mistakes. And so what I've done over the years with my web design process, and now as I'm creating these new processes in a new environment, is looking at where are the breaks happening. So when you go through the process with a client and you go, like my last 3 clients really, stuffed up in this one spot, or they got confused, or they went off track, or they expressed, this is where it shifted to worker bee or whatever. If you go back and you kind of really like assess where people are getting stuck or where you're repeating work, and any of those like sticking points, and then figure out like, how am I going to improve on that for the next time. I find that kind of like self-assessment / feedback on your own process is worth the time and the effort, because it's gonna improve your process, which is going to save you money, make you more profitable, save you time, whatever, the next time. And so like I just literally went through that and created a whole new video production process for what I'm working on, because it was like, I was kind of guessing at it in the first time, and I was like, oops, okay, we're really getting stuck. Too many revision cycles. Why?
Yeah. That's almost like learning the act to be aware of where the processes should be, like that's, that's huge. Well, I don't know if you've got anything else to add, but I think that's probably a pretty good place to end it, unless you want to chuck anything else in there. But I think that kind of covers it for processes. I mean, that's a great introduction to. Yeah.
Anything that you find yourself repeating, write it down. Write down your processes, but particularly write down those steps that repeat, because those are the ones that you're going to save time on next time.
That's it. Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you very much, Christine, and thank you everyone for tuning in, and I'll chat again.
Bye.
Bye.